I want to start a little bit about asking that how has the year overall started for you?
Really, for me, 2020 was when a new life started for me in every way. If my not living studio, the pandemic thing, health things were happening that I had to get fixed. I had a couple of serious things that I had to get surgery for that I didn't know I had, and I was the luckiest guy in the world because I had COVID really bad in March 2020, the first one of the original
Yeah.
COVIDs, and I was really, really close to being done. That changed my life because when I recovered from that, the main recovery took 2 weeks to be able to breathe again. And after that, I changed a lot of things. I looked at things a lot differently. And it was like, okay, does my family know I love them? Are they financially well off? Yeah, yeah. Okay. What about my music catalog with Annihilator? And I was like, oh no, it's scattered. So many different labels have so many different albums. Some aren't on Spotify, some aren't on iTunes. Most of them you can't get in the stores. So I wasn't taking care of that business for maybe 10 years. I was enjoying the rise of Annihilator since 2010 to 2007. Slowly, we've been going up and up. And I was enjoying the touring part where we would play festivals. Sometimes we'd play at 3 p.m. at Wacken. And all of a sudden now we were playing with Rammstein at Wacken. And then we were playing at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at festivals. Now I'm co-headlining things. So I've been too busy enjoying, for a decade, I was too busy enjoying the rise of the touring part and having a lot of fun and keeping the same band together because we were having so much fun with it. I didn't take care of the CD or the record music side. I just made the records and just, labels were doing what they were doing, right? And part of that's understandable. After this COVID thing hit, and I was like, okay, that's it. If I had left the earth at that point, my Annihilator catalog was a mess. I didn't, it wasn't available, and I had about 6 records that nobody owned. That they didn't even have a label. I was like scratching my head, going, how did I miss this? And it's not being a bad business person because I was doing great at the other business. It's just that one I was not looking after. So pandemic hit. I took care of a lot of business. I sold almost all my records catalog, which is like 22 titles to Ear Music Adel in Germany. 3 more stayed with Warner, which was Alice in Hell, Never Neverland, Set the World on Fire. And now I've done a deal with them again. So that should be coming out. So I put my catalog in place, but I also thought if the world shut down for a few years, which it ended up being here in England, I'm going to make use of this most beautiful studio that I have. Part of this is thanks to my wife. I already had equipment and guitars and was doing okay as a musician. I was doing really well for a musician and a heavy metal musician. But my wife literally had this studio, the studio above, the loft above, and the building, most of it built on her money. And then I just turned it into the most beautiful studio I'd have ever seen for mixing and for tracking. So I thought, well, if we're shut down, perfect. I'm going to write stuff, but not for metal, not for Annihilator, not for other artists that I was doing years ago. I'm just going to sit here and have fun and enjoy life. And finally, for the first time in my life, I had the time and the studio, and mainly the time and money to eat and to pay the bills. So, but really it's time to not think about Annihilator and say, who would you like to get in a band to make a record? And what kind of music would you like to make right now? And I thought, fucking Van Halen, AC/DC, Rolling Stones, Black Crowes, a bit of GNR. And I know it's unrealistic to think that I am going to be able to write that stuff at that level. So, I mean, I'm good at Annihilator, and I also have written a lot of songs for other artists, but that was just the music. I didn't have anything to do with the production. I'd write the music, send it to Nashville. A lyricist would put lyrics, and they'd sell the songs. So, and that's easy because I love ballads, so I'd write a lot of ballads, and they turned out to be country hits, a lot of them. But when it comes to doing a whole record and writing the lyrics and the whole production, I'm not going to be able to make something at the level of Van Halen or AC/DC. So I decided, well, then I guess I'll have to hire some people that work with those bands. So I hired Mike Fraser, who did the Balance album by Van Halen. He's done every AC/DC since Razor's Edge in 1990. He's in Vancouver. incredible, well-known mix engineer and engineer. So I got him to track the drums in Vancouver with Brian Tichy, who's also Dead Daisies, Whitesnake, Billy Idol, who's a huge Van Halen fan, Alex Van Halen fan. So I got my perfect drummer for that part. And I looked for a singer that was not a metal singer. I wanted somebody that was either bluesy or gospel or clean voice, and got a guy from a Foreigner cover band in New York. And he's very busy doing Foreigner all the time with his band. Makes a lot of money, makes some good music. He sounds like Lou Gramm, very good artist, very talented. He does some other things too. And I thought, nah, it's very clean voice. Maybe that's too clean. And then I called him again and said, no, you got to do it. This is what I need. Something that's not like Annihilator or heavy metal. And let's get a clean singer in. So that's what I did. I just literally thought, let's just do I'd say big budget, but for today, it's a huge budget. For the old days, it's a middle, small budget. But I said, okay, I'm going to put 100 grand in pounds, which is a lot of money in other parts of the world. And there's the budget. This pandemic, I'm going to do a record, and I don't care if it sells. I don't care. It's just, I'm doing it for me, and I want to do a really good album and take my time. And that's what I did. I did this record. I didn't know what the title was going to be. And I shopped it because with my many years in the business, I do know a lot of people, and in the sort of even the pop world and from the writing stuff, country and pop. So I was able to get through to a couple of sort of big names still in the record companies. And I had about 3 offers to sign that record, but it was the worst deal in history, right? It was terrible because you've got a bunch of old guys. It's not really a band, it's a project. And and all of us are not really famous. We're known, but we're not famous and huge and, like a James Hetfield or a David Coverdale, So they all said the same. Production's amazing. We like the songs. We hear the influences. But you don't have a 22-year-old singer jumping off the PA, and it's not a band, and you're not touring, right? So I was kind of like, oh, fuck yeah. Yeah, they're right. They're right. So what did I do? I said, fuck it. I don't need a record deal. Let's do another record. And I was like, yeah, let's do 3 records. Let's do 3 different records, 3 different singers, 3 different bunch of people, different productions, different guitar setups, different everything, different bass, different mixes, everything different. If I'm controlling this and producing it and writing it, it is going to sound like me. Yeah. But I wanted to make sure I did enough changes on every record where some people actually don't realize that I'm on the second and third record. They have no clue. Like some people hear it and they go, the ones that have heard this are like, they had no idea it was me, because it's different kinds of music. Like the first one that you're hearing, Armageddon Boogie's the first one, is the more what you might expect if I did a solo thing. Yeah. It's just like, okay, Waters is an older guy. He likes 80s metal. He likes, that kind of music. He's not playing like, it's before I got into Venom and Slayer and Razor and Anvil and Exciter and the big 4, right? So you're going to get that little Scorpions, even like some commercial vibes in there, like really commercial vibes in some things. There's a bit of Californian stuff. There's a tribute to Van Halen in one of the songs, their impact that they had on everybody and thanking them for the ride, like what they did for everybody. And just all these different styles. Like the opening track, I think, is called My Little Devil. I think it's like people scratching their head going, is this a Hell's Bells vibe? Oh, is this Black Crowes or Rolling Stones? Like, what is that? And then the next song's different with a shuffle and a Van Halen group. So it's kind of a mixture of styles, but it really does have a sound. The next 2 that come out, people are just going to go shake their head and go, what the fuck just happened? Like, what is this?
So basically you had a snowball and then you threw it and then you didn't catch it anymore.
Didn't want the first one. I thought I could sign a record deal, but I got 3 offers, but they were shitty. They were not. And it wasn't because they were bad labels. It was because of what they said. It's not the popular style of music anywhere. It's a bunch of older guys. We're not famous enough. And we don't have a young front person on tour right now that's getting headlines. So that's what the record companies, most of them, really want to be having. That's what they do for a living. And That's what I want to see. I want to go, when I go to a concert, I don't want to see 5 people standing there. I want to see somebody like, risking death, jumping off a PA, or risking a knee surgery, like Dickinson, or like, Halford driving a motorcycle underneath a drum riser and banging his head. I want to see that shit. That's real effort, right? I just said, I'm not. Well, how about this? I did the second record, and I knew I was going to do the third. I wanted to do a trilogy and see if I could do it. It was like a challenge. Could I make 3 different records with different people, and would I think they're all good in their own way? And the next step is, would anybody that hears it say that's total shit or garbage or crap? Or would they go, I like the first one and the third one, I don't like the second one? I think that's what's going to happen. It's going to be like the Kiss. Remember when Kiss were all arguing and they decided the managers had a good way to keep them together for a while? Everybody does a solo record. You know what I mean? So I think that's kind of the idea. Is I did 3 different records, and you might not like all 3, but hopefully you'll like at least one. So
was this something that was like cooking in your head for like decades?
No, I'd given up on there's a few things in my little 35-year Annihilator career, which is actually, I started the band with a guy named John back in Ottawa in December 84. So technically speaking, we're coming up to 40 fucking years since that name is out there. But the first music was really, Crystal Ann was the first thing I wrote. And that would have been in December 84. So if I really look at that, December 84 is the 40th year since that first song on the first album was written. But really, there was demos for 85, 86, and 87. But really the first, 89, that's the 35-year thing, right? I didn't know what to do after the second one, but I was happy that I did 2 badass records. Stu Block is on the second one singing, and you won't know it's him. You'll think it's like a cross between Mike Patton from Faith No More, Drainman from Disturbed, and someone else. It's like you shake your head and go, who's that singer? Is that like, it's a really cool original voice. He's combined a couple of things. When we were working with Stu and with the guy from Armageddon Boogie, Chandler Mogul, the idea was, let's find 1 or 2 voices and stick with them the whole way. Because if you don't know a singer or an album or a band, and you hear it for the first time, you don't really want to hear 10 different voices. It confuses you. So I thought, for the first ones, let's just keep it very straightforward. We'll pick 2 voices, and that's all you're going to sing the whole album. And it worked out really cool. Like Brian Johnson or Bon Scott, they have that one voice that everybody recognizes, right? But not like Halford, who's got I'd say about 8 voices. Like, he's got about 8 of them.
Yeah, it's a lot.
But after the second one, that's when I started going, you know what? This second one is beyond anything I've ever done, except for my second record called Never Neverland. I sort of put this second Amerikan Kaos record, which won't be out till next year. I kind of put that as my tie for my best record I've ever done. And that was when I started getting more serious and thinking, hang on a second. It's, musicians think like this. Everything we do is great and it's the best, but it's not, right? Only some things are. And in fact, some things are actually just shit. That's why some people never get a record deal or never get to do anything, because it's just not good. And I've done that with Annihilator, where I think some songs or records are really good, and I look back and go, oh boy, I could have done much better.
You cannot never know.
No, you can stay on it, like Axl with Chinese Democracy. That's actually, to me, is one of my favorite records by him, and probably in my top 50 of all time. But he took all those years to make it. And I didn't want to spend 5 or 10 years on one fucking project record. I had to time it and say, I'm going to give myself 5 months per album, is really what I was saying. And that's a lot of time. Bands now just go in and send the track to their house, and they do a DI guitar track and send it back to the mixer, and he reamps it and puts a sound to it. This was done. These albums that I'm doing were actually properly professionally recorded. Greece, Vancouver, New Jersey, Durham in England, and the Armory Studios in Vancouver. So this was actually a big budget project. But again, it doesn't mean people will like it, right? So I really tried hard, did the 5 months on each record. And but after the second one with Stu, I was like, oh man, I have to get somebody's got to hear this. You know, like before it was like I didn't care. I was in my studio cranking up for my friends, and the people at the studios around were thinking it was really good. But after the second one was finished with Stu, I was like, oh no, okay, I gotta do my best to get this out. Went back to the labels, said, have a listen to the second one. And now they're more interested. Still shitty deals offers, right? It's still just, you put all this time and money in.
How it is nowadays, unfortunately.
Yeah, but it wasn't for me. I was lucky, or I am lucky. I have been lucky too, with health and with money and with my music and all that stuff. Been very lucky to survive and still have this following. And we might not have been the biggest band in the world, but we sure have constantly been out there and annoying everybody. I wasn't doing this project for money. I wasn't doing it to, oh, Jeff Waters solo project. It's going to be great. Look at me play lead guitar, shredder. No, I didn't. That's not what this is about. It was about, I finally have the best studio I could ever dream of being in, and I'm not going to let it waste. I got lots of time off. I like other kinds of music. Let's just do something fun. And then it progressed to, like, it wasn't about getting a deal to get money back. I assumed I was going to lose all that money. That was kind of how I was looking at it. And once we got through the second one, then it was like, no, I at least have to try to get some people to hear this stuff to see if they like it. You know, like it's not going to get on the radio and get in sales charts and nothing. I just want it to be able to be heard if somebody hears it and goes, hey, you got to check out this Amerikan Kaos thing. This is that Waters guy's project. So as long as it's available, Spotify, iTunes, LPs, CDs, I don't care about this record company push and distribution money and PR firms and shit, because that's old school and that's for a bigger band. And this isn't even a band. This is a project that's never been out there before. So the idea that I want to spend £300,000 here to hire PR firms to promote my new music is stupid. So I thought, let's just do this. Let's go to a bunch of video game companies. And a lot of times video game companies, whether it's like a PC or Mac, like actual old school video games, or on your phone or tablet or online, a lot of them, let's say, I'm just going to make up an example. Let's say Five Finger Death Punch will get approached by a big video game company and say, we want one of your new songs from your new album on our video game. Well, that would mean the company has to go through the manager, the band, the publisher, and the rights holder, which is the record company that owns the master audio. So that means there's 4 groups that have to get paid off, right, to use that. So even if they offer Five Finger or offer Death Punch like $300,000 to use that song in their video game, well, manager gets his percentage. Separately to that, the record company and the publisher are paid on a separate deal. And then the band gets what's the writers or whatever get their cut. And right. So it's kind of like, then there's restrictions. The video game company, sometimes they can't just use that song on a television ad or an online ad, or there's rules, there's restrictions. So the contracts will say you can only use the song for these things. And so there's a lot of restrictions to the video game companies, and they also have to pay a lot of money. So I thought, hang on a second. They have their in-house people that work for them and make music for games. Then they get the big superstar groups and they pay them hundreds of thousands and millions to use their songs. Where's the people in the middle? So I thought, I'm going to do 3 records, 3 album covers with a theme, but 3 album covers, same artist, a logo, a name of a band, and go up to video game companies and say, here's 3 records, 3 covers, 3 booklets. Here's the logo and the name of the band. You can take it all. The trademark, it's called. You can own it all. Just give me 1 check or 1 bank wire, and you can have all of that. And you don't have to ask me about anything. You can do anything you want with the songs. You can get record deals. You can put it in silly TV commercials. I don't care what you do. Here's my music. I've done it. I'm happy. Here you go. Give me money. So that's what happened is.
Okay, so that's what's happened with Rock
So,
Commander game.
right, because you have to think out of the box, because a lot of people say, like, for new bands, it's really difficult. But I've seen a lot of people in the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years start out with new bands, and you see them on Facebook. You know, these people, sometimes girls or guys that are like 23 years old, like I was when I first did Alice in Hell. And you shake your head and you feel so sorry for them, because so talented, and they got an image, and they're young and they're energetic and very talented. But what chance do they have to make this a career? Like, look, everybody else,
to none.
Hey, what about all the metal fans that would complain about, oh, bands making money? Well, those metalheads, their dream is to own a house, and they work, they have a job, and maybe have a boat or a jet ski, or maybe go on vacation to Mexico or Spain, or maybe have a cottage if you're a Canadian, right, up in the lakes. This is the dream of most people. I mean, some people, of course, in the world, their dream is to just eat and have healthcare, but you know what I'm saying? Generally, it's like, well, what chance does a 23-year-old talented young musician have? Well, it's much different than the earlier days. There's way less. I mean, like with the internet, with the online stuff, with the economy, with this lockdown, and all prices go up, and they didn't put them down after all the scams going on and the government shit and everything. But so I'm thinking, I feel sorry for them, and then I feel like, well, at least I'm okay, and I survived, and but then I realized, look at some of these people who the band, or two people or one person in the band, are actually maybe 23 years old with not much chance of making a living out of this. They're working 24 hours a day, making their own merch, sending it out, which is what we did in the old days too. But there are people now that are trying to figure out how to get around the traditional shitty business that's happening now, and find other ways to make it work. And oh man, it's so cool when you see it happen. And I thought, I'm going to apply that too. I can't get a decent record deal, and I think the music's good. Let me go to the gaming companies. And once again, 3 companies were interested. And I went with the smallest company, and the one that had the coolest idea for a video game, which was about being a musician and starting your little life in a band, to put the band together and buy the equipment and rent the van and get to the gig and battle the bands and all that stuff. I thought, how perfect and fitting is it that and you know what? Sometimes I will go, I'm giving the middle finger to the record companies. I'm doing a different idea. It's not that, because the big bad record companies are also not always the big bad record company. Musicians like to shit on the record companies being the blame for everything, but it's not always that, right? It's not always the companies. So record companies today have to be very careful with what they spend. Like, they don't have the money to sign a new band, the older guys playing older kind of music, and throw all this money into promoting them and send me on press trips all over the world and buy advertising online and in print press even. So I'm just literally lucky that I came up with an alternate idea, and the company that seemed the most interesting was the guy that owned Sweden Rock for years and sold it. And I've kept in touch with him over the years a little bit, but I didn't really know him. And then to find out that he's got some money, he's investing in this, he's trying different projects. Some are not music, and I'm like, there's a guy that was in the music business, built his little fortune or legacy in the music business, running Sweden Rock, right? And all of a sudden now he's doing this and doing that and trying different things with his success from the early days. It's exactly what I'm doing. I'm just having fun, trying to think of different ideas. And me and the guy from the company, Michael, we're just having fun. We're just literally Skyping each other once in a while going, what do you think about doing this idea and that idea? So we're having fun and he gets me to sort of check out the video game process as they were making the game. And, you know, is this how you pronounce it in English? Is this how it's said? And, you know, go back and forth. And I'd play it and go, this is too confusing, or this is, so I had a really tiny bit of, no, I didn't really have any input in the game, but it was, I guess I did, because if you notice the title of his game, it's Rock Commander. It's with a K, and that's coming from my Amerikan Kaos. So I guess I did have something to do with it. But, I'll let you ask questions.
Translations to the Finnish version, so I've been also involved with the game a little bit then.
Perfect.
So obviously there's an album turning 35, and you will be playing a show for that. So how far is actually the preparations for it?
Whee! There she is.
So how does it feel from your end that you have an album in your hand which is 35 years old next month?
Well, off camera, but on camera, I'm fucking lucky to be alive and smiling.
Did you ever, even in your wildest dreams, would have imagined that you would be playing it through like 35 years after writing it?
You know what?
Recording it?
As you go through your career, if you have a long career, you know, sometimes when you're young, especially, you kind of have this, it's like a healthy ego, but it's a drive, it's an ego. And sometimes you lose a bit of track of reality, and you think it's never going to end. You're never going to end, or you don't save your little money you make, because it's never going to end. I'm always going to be on tour with Judas Priest. I'm always going to be putting albums out. So, and then maybe drink too much or whatever the things are. But when I started with this band in '84, December, my goal was, I'd been a heavy metal fan before that, not thrash metal, heavy metal. That meant Scorpions, Kiss, AC/DC, Van Halen back then, right? And an Ozzy, first couple of Ozzy albums, and then Jakey Lee. So I was that was before the '84 era for me. So I would have been 17 or so. And before that was I Was Made for Loving You, Kiss, If You Want My Body and You Think I'm Sexy, that Carmen Apice and Rod Stewart song. It was Donna Summer. It was disco. It was New York music. Billy Joel, Glass Houses. It was, you know, and then that's going back. So I would have been 10, right? Then guess what came out in '78? I was 12. In '78, this space alien was on the radio. It was called Eruption. So when Eruption hit the airways from Van Halen 1, that changed everything, because it was rock and roll and hard rock. But then all of a sudden, a space alien is playing in shopping malls and all through the radio. It was like, what is this? Is that even a guitar? Is that a keyboard? What is it? And that was a change for me. I went out of the pop music, Elton John and all that stuff that now remember, I was 10, 11, 12, right? So we were at 10 years old, I was roller skating in a roller disco in Ottawa, Canada. They would have, in North America, thousands. I'm sure they had it everywhere in Scandinavia, because even though, you know, it's Sweden, right? But Scandinavia, that was kind of the center of that ABBA, you know, like coming out. But it was roller disco when I was 10. So I was listening to pop, you know, 70s rock, but it was disco. And Kiss with I Was Made for Loving You was so huge. So, you know, I saw that Kiss Live 2 covers, blah, blah, blah. I shifted. Then I heard The Sweet, Desolation Boulevard, and then Fox on the Run was on the radio, and Ballroom Blitz. So I was kind of like a heavy, first pop and disco as a little kid. Then it shifted to hard rock, heavy metal. And then '84 or '83, I don't know when it was, I heard the first album, Heavy Metal Maniac from Exciter. I heard that Venom, War with Satan or whatever it was, the first Venom stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that was before Slayer. The first two albums, especially the first one, Hard and Heavy by Anvil, those first two albums were extremely influential on the Big Four, especially Metallica.
Yeah.
And a lot of people remember Anvil as that goofy pot smoking Canadian band, metal band in the movie that they see on the airplane, the documentary.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not saying metalheads don't know. I'm saying the general population.
Audience, yeah.
But what can't be understated enough is Hard and Heavy was Canada's answer to the best of Ted Nugent. So Hard and Heavy was mind-blowing record, rock and roll, Ted Nugent based rock. And they changed on Metal and decided we're going to also invent heavy metal. And that's where the second album and the anthem Metal on Metal. But you listen to 666 and Mothra and all that stuff. All that time changing that Rob Reiner, the drummer, was doing, that was Metallica right away. As kids saw that and heard that, and they went, whoa. And that's where Lars got a bit of his strange timing from sometimes. Rob Reiner taught him from those albums. So I got into thrash, the big four, the first albums, Haunting the Chapel, Slayer, the first Exodus of Bailoff, but then, I loved the stuff after that too, with Vetro, and then first Anthrax album, Death from Above with Neil Turbin, and then a few after that. And of course, Megadeth's first couple of records too. So anyway, I don't even know what the question is, but that was my musical history. So when Amerikan Kaos comes out, I'm reverting back to before, not all of it, but a lot of it is happening before that heavy metal thing that I liked. So I found myself going back to the Knack. If you remember them, they came out the same time as Van Halen did. Everybody knows them as My Sharona, but they had the first two albums they had were unbelievable, and they were one of the best musician bands ever. That when they rock and roll bands, not in the area of Rush or that kind of technical talent and prog stuff, but as a rock and roll band, the Knack were probably in the top three, but people don't know that. They had a quick ride. But I'm going back to everything from disco to the Knack to a bit of the Stones and stuff, like as we progress. And then you've got the singer Stu Block who comes on, who is nothing like Into Eternity, nothing like Iced Earth, nothing like heavy metal, and you're not even going to know he's the singer. You'll have no clue.
So, so how does the future look overall? Because you have said that there will be like a lot of like Annihilator celebrations happening.
This is what happens. It's what happens when you have a bit of ADHD. You forget the question. So yes, this year is going to be fun. Right back to the very first question. 2024 is going to be fun. We're celebrating that 35th anniversary of Alice in Hell with Annihilator, and we weren't going to tour until 2025 because I wanted to get this Amerikan Kaos done, and I didn't realize I was going to be ahead of schedule. So I have this year to relax, and a promoter in Slovakia kept persisting and saying, "Can you please play this show?" And we're like, well, I mean, I was thinking in my mind, of course, okay, Sweden Rock, Hellfest, Wacken, Monterey Metal Fest, Hell in Heaven in Mexico, right? Yeah. I was thinking that's where we're going to go when we do it. But he kept pursuing it and said, well, we got Five Finger Death Punch. And then, we got Scorpions. And I'm like, oh, okay. That sounds, I love the Scorpions. I love Five Finger Death Punch. So maybe I should look at this. And my agent, Nick, said, come on, just do it. Like, come out and that'll get promoters and people all excited. Maybe if you do a good job, then people will see it on YouTube or on Facebook or whatever and go, fuck, I want to see that band next year. So I'm just doing the show really for fun, and also to technically for myself say, yeah, the 35th anniversary, yeah, we'll do one show. But also there's a little business in there too, which is next year, 2025 would be the 35th anniversary of my favorite Annihilator record and the biggest selling one. It's called Never Neverland. So that's where that's where I'm putting my money.
Okay, so you'll be playing more about that next year, or will you do both? Or
exactly. It makes sense to do both because we never let people see the Alice in Hell set in Europe or anywhere else, so we might as well combine that and do the two albums in 2025. Or I'll sell everything and sit on a beach somewhere and just check into your online site and see what's going on once a month.
So how is it with Ray? Because he was supposed to play with Topfest and then it got canceled. So will he be next year playing with you, or
where is he? Okay, so this guy here, Anthony, where is he? No, I'm going this side. A lot of people say online, and people don't know this, his name's Anthony Greenham. He was on the Alice in Hell cover, and he wasn't in the band. I just needed somebody with long hair because the record company said, we need 5 guys in the band because there's going to be 5 guys on tour. I never picked the guitar player yet. So we got to, and you know, that guy was actually a roadie, and he went on to, I think, tour manage with Nickelback for a long time.
Okay.
Wayne here, haven't talked to him since 1999. And apparently, to be nice, I don't think he's doing too well. So let's just leave it there. But wish him all the best. He was one of my best friends in the early days. This guy looks funny. He's me. Randy passed away, I believe 2018. I'll have to double check that. But he was Randy Rampage, the singer. Okay, he didn't write anything, and he was more of a punk rock guy, and his voice was not what you'd say a singer.
Yeah.
However, without the voice that this guy gave us and incredible, it's like a fuck you punk attitude on stage. We all played our music on stage on the Alice in Hell tour, and we tried to play it tight and perfect. But he's the guy that sold the band. He's the guy that everybody was looking at, and that everybody recognized his growly, thrashy punk voice. So Randy was really, like, personally, that's a different story. But I only talk really about Randy, about his contribution to Annihilator. I mean, without that voice, maybe I wouldn't have the life I have today. Ray was, I'd written Ray Hartman, drummer. He was on the Alice in Hell and Never Neverland record. He was on a few songs on Set the World on Fire. He was the drummer on Criteria for Black Widow and Carnival Diablos. So Ray was the first person I met when I moved in 1987 to start getting the band together and recording an album. He's the first guy I got into the band. And I think I don't know how old he is, but I think he's definitely past 60. Maybe he's 60, I don't know, but he's not in his 50s. He and I would get together and jam, and I had all the I demoed all the songs except maybe 3 for the first 2 records. So what was it? Alice in Hell, Never Neverland. All the songs except 3, I believe, were written between 84 and 87. So before I met any of these guys on the Alice in Hell record, before I even moved from Ottawa, Canada to Vancouver to start looking for musicians and a singer, I'd already written all those songs, but except 3. So that would have been, 8 and 10. So I would have written about 15 songs already and demoed them in 85, 86, 87 with me singing, or the original guy from back in the early days. They were on cassette demos sent out to all the fanzines around the world in 85, 86, like a demo called Welcome to Your Death and a demo called Phantasmagoria. They had all these songs on there. And I was playing drums on a lot of those songs. And the guy that I would originally went down and did this with is named Paul Malik from Ottawa. And he was a drummer. And he let me get on his drum kit and come up with my ideas. And he would run back onto his drums, and then he'd record them better. So we had that whole thing done years before that album came out, both albums.
Okay.
Just a little history, because a lot of people don't know that. They think, a lot of times they'll see online, I'm not taking anything away from anyone, but this sort of, everybody knows it's kind of my project, my band.
Yeah.
For example, the bass playing. Wayne Darley was the first bass player on the Alice in Hell tour to work with me. So he was our touring bass player, but he's on the album cover. So a lot of people thought, oh, the bass playing on, Alice in Hell and all that. I like Wayne the best. He was the best bass player. And then they talk about other bass players. But I've done 17 studio records with Annihilator, and I've played all of the bass on every song except 3. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. There's like, I think 2 or 3 songs where, maybe even only 2, where somebody else played the bass. So I kept that quiet because I didn't want to disturb this idea that it was a band, right? But I was smart enough to know when to, musically, to know when to get the musicians to contribute and when they were good enough. So I had some really good guys playing some solos on a few songs that people didn't know I didn't even do. There was the big one for me was that people would find interesting. There's a beautiful solo on the song called Phoenix Rising. And it's off Set the World on Fire album in '93, and it's a ballad. And I wrote it. My aunt had died of cancer, and I wrote a song about that with a lyricist in Nashville. And there's a beautiful classical guitar solo in it. I didn't play that. That was my other guitar player, Neil Goldberg. So I knew when I was trying the solo, I was like, what I'm doing just doesn't sound right. So Neil, I said, Neil, this is more your thing. Take my guitar, go do the solo. So he would do it. That didn't happen very much, but there's a few examples of that. I knew when to take the talented people and let them do their own thing. But generally, I mean, Alice in Hell was the drums, the bass, the lyrics, the vocal, everything. We had like 3 or 4 singers audition in the studio for the Alice in Hell album. And, all of them, over the decades, all of them claimed to have written the songs and, got lawyers. And it's really funny, actually, how it works. Another one, too, behind the scenes. And I can laugh at this because it's in the past. And now it's funny. But people that don't know the behind the scenes stuff, which is not important for people to know. But there's been a lot of people that I will maybe hire to go on tour or hire to play a part or drummer in the studio. 10, 15, 20 years later, I get a lawyer notice threatening to sue me if I don't give them money, and they claim they wrote the songs, all this crazy stuff. You wouldn't believe this happens every couple of years. I've got to deal with these things. And that's exactly what anyone has to deal with, whether you're an actor, own a company, own a band that's successful or even moderately successful. I've had the whole life since that album came out has everything. I quit alcohol completely 24 years ago because my early days it was just a party, right? So you do what everybody else is doing, you drink. And I always said, I won't do drugs. I don't do drugs, right? But then I'd run into the bus and drink 12 beers. And smoke 2 packs of cigarettes. So I stayed away from the criminal part of that, which is drugs. I didn't want to get arrested and then I couldn't travel. And I'd always say, I think even on the first or second Annihilator record, there's a little thing at the bottom about anti-drug campaign that I was a part of. And it was so funny because you got this kid, Alice in Hell, Never Neverland, with a, anti-drug, stop the madness. No drugs. Drugs are bad. But I was actually taking so many drugs in the form of alcohol and cigarettes that I shouldn't have been promoting that, right? But up and down. I've toured with some amazing bands. I've done two tours with Judas Priest. There was an opening band on the first one with Priest that nobody knew, really no one knew. And they left the tour halfway through because fans weren't really liking it. And they were being a bit rude to the crowd and walking off stage. And they became one of the fucking best, coolest bands ever, Pantera. So we shared the bus with them for a month or two, had a lot of stories. A lot of different music. I've done so many different styles of music since then over the years, different lineups. I always change lineups. A lot of times I like to change lineups. I've done records on no budget, on low budget. I've done a lot of the work myself. So sometimes I'm not the best at all the jobs. So sometimes some of the albums didn't sound that good. Sometimes I would do an album and I would think, oh, this sounds terrible. And then fans would go, what an amazing sounding album. And then other times I'll do a really good sounding record and they'll go, I don't like the sound. So, there's so many stories, man. We could spend hours, but nobody wants to hear all those. But Alice is, I'm talking to Warner because Warner owned the first 3 Annihilator records. And next year is Neverland. And 2 years later, Set the World on Fire. So I'm trying to align with them to reissue and do LPs and do something with the 3 albums. And what a fun way to do it. I don't have to go and tour for 10 months like I used to in the past. I don't have to physically do things and mentally, right? Do things that will kill me young, no sleep and crazy stuff that will leave it for the younger people or the Bruce Dickinsons or the priests to do. I don't have to do those really hardworking, stressful things. Now I can finally come sit back and get on the phone and talk about reissues and sell catalog stuff and just do special concerts and special shows that are a lot of fun. And I'm also able now to do things like I can get in my car and drive down to the south of England and go see a band or hang out with a musician somewhere in England. Or I never used to be able to do that. Before it was always Annihilator, always busy. So I'm enjoying my life right now, that's for sure. But lots of Annihilator coming.
About new music in the end, will there be like new music to those celebrations,
Nope.
or will you focus more on the classic stuff? Old classic?
I think I retired the Annihilator recording as soon as Ballistic Sadistic came out, my last album. That was January 2020. But we did the tour for it before Christmas. We did it before. The record company said, no, you put your album out and then you tour. And I said no. And if you think about the timing on that, if the album comes out January 30th or whatever, 2020, guess what happened if we went on tour after that, right?
Yeah.
Shut down, done. So that was the luckiest decision I ever made. And we did a 2-month European tour, which was, for us, was one of our most successful ones for many years. And then the album came out and we already finished the record. And I was telling the guys, I was saying, I am not Bruce Dickinson. I am not, you know what I mean? That's not me. I spend a lot of time doing in my life, not just being in a band playing guitar or now singing. I spend my life engineering, mixing, mastering, managing, booking, merchandise, legal, coordinating all that, and doing a lot of it myself. So this is a 24-hour job. The phone rings at 3 in the morning, I would answer it. So I've done more work that if you say, yeah, but you didn't tour as much as Judas Priest, or you didn't, all these things. I say 17 studio records. I did almost all of it myself, except for, writing. I mean, writing most of it myself, most of the recording, almost all the instruments. I wrote almost every drum thing that you're hearing on those records, mixed almost all of those records, produced almost all, so.
Yeah, you did many jobs within one.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you look at it from a time perspective, when a singer will go in a band, usually either they write the lyrics or, in the case of Skid Row or some other bands, sometimes the guitar player or maybe Charlie Benante or something writes the lyrics for, maybe he writes the lyrics for Joey Belladonna. I don't know how that works. But for example, the early Skid Row, Bolin and Snake wrote most everything, right? So if you're a singer in a band and let's say you're writing just the lyrics, which is a big job. Well, you write the lyrics when the band's finished the music, usually, right? So you're at home and you get an email saying, here's a link to Dropbox and here's the music, write your lyrics. So the singer kicks back and writes lyrics. Somebody sends a car or a taxi, or they take a bus or drive their car and they go to a studio and they spend a week, 2 weeks, maybe, doing vocals, right? Well, and that's it, right? I mean, that's
his part.
Right. And maybe there's some rehearsals before, and maybe there's press trips to go on and talking and all that. But I was doing all of the jobs.
Yeah.
And accountant, tax people, the whole fucking thing. This is my life. I love it. And I realized early I was seeing musicians that I really liked that were getting guitars, signature guitars in stores like Alexi Leho, or who was a good friend of mine, and I helped them with some things in that area in the 2000 era. I would see people having guitars in every store in the world, selling a couple million records and packing 5,000-seater arenas, and they'd be living in a rented apartment somewhere. And I would be like, you're not making money at this? Like, I was shocked at this, but anyway, like, there's a whole, anyway, you better ask questions or I'll just ramble all day and night here. I'm fine. You can tell I like talking.
No, 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 and I like listening. So there's like two good
Hey,
sides.
I didn't answer your question about Ray Hartman. We
Answer.
got Ray Hartman. See, this is what happens with a creative brain meets ADHD. So I have to keep focusing and write it down. With Ray, he was going to come back. I haven't played with Ray in a couple of decades, and we thought we better just do an early rehearsal to see if Ray is physically okay to do this, because from my perspective, there's a couple of the ex-members where everybody would say online, why didn't you get this guy back? Wayne Darley, the bass player. Why don't you get Dave Davis, the guitar? Why don't you get these people back? And Coburn Farr, and some of them might be able to do it. But behind the scenes, if you're in the metal music thing, and even just to stand on a stage, to get on a plane, fly, get jet lag, go into rehearsals for a couple of weeks, change your whole life. Whatever you were doing before is different now. Get on a bus, have to get along with all these people, and now you're not living in a nice house or a nice environment, and you're not necessarily eating the same foods. You're not getting sleep. You're getting sick all the time on the bus. If you're younger, or if your whole life is spent doing that, like a Lemmy or me, or you spend your whole, whether it doesn't matter who it is, big, small artist.
But you have to stop at some point, and
You
then
stop.
like 2 decades after you want to continue. That's like totally different ball game.
I think. I mean, the analogy or comparison is kind of obvious. Then, if you take a heroin addict or a coke addict who does that every day and night, all the time for a few years, and they work up their level, and then they quit. Well, a lot of them die when they start again because they use the same dose. So it's the same kind of thing. You can't just call up somebody that's in their 50s or 60s who hasn't been on a tour for 30 years or 20, 25 years and say, come on, let's do it again. I can do it, and my guys can do it because we do this, but it's different for the older guys. So I found out when I went back to try to get, because it's not just a business thing. It's really because you want to just try to get that feel of playing those songs with the guys that you toured with before. And with with Ray Hartman to play with a guy that played on the record. So, and did tours with Judas Priest and Neverland tours with. So it was a very sentimental thing for me. Plus I wanted to do, I tried to get Randy Rampage back in 2018 before he passed away. He had his part-time kind of solo band called Rampage, and I guess they play a show every 6 months. It wasn't a band. It was like a part-time thing. Yeah. But I tried to get him back and spoke with him. And my deal with Randy was, listen, because Randy is a very special person. He has some things that, like, I'm clean and sober and don't do drugs, don't drink, and all that. And Randy is different, and everybody knows that knows anything about Randy. He's from that punk life, and a lot of that life didn't stop for him since the early days. But I said, Randy, let's just go on tour. You bring your band Rampage as the support band, and we'll do the Alice in Hell 30-year anniversary or whatever it is at the time. And then you take a rest, jump on stage, and we'll do the Alice in Hell album. So with Annihilator. And then he passed away after that. So that was, because Randy and I were never friends. We were never, ever hung out as friends. He was just the guy that we were all trying to keep sober enough to do the job, to do the tours, do the album. And we realized we couldn't do it. We couldn't. That's why he left. Because we couldn't keep him on the right track, and he had a job and other things he wanted to do. But I said, let's get him back again. Let's just try it for one tour just to see. And he passed away. Then that idea was pretty shitty, because not only because we don't have the original singer, but because it was a really bad feeling, right? Like, we lost him. So we weren't going to do that idea then, because we don't have his voice. Then Stu Block and I were talking, and I'd asked him, I said, what's your favorite Annihilator? He goes, well, I kind of like Alice in Hell. And I'm like, so you being a great singer, vocalist like Stu Block, you liked Randy Rampage's voice? And he goes, fuck yeah, man. He had the most attitude. He said, there's nobody with more attitude than guys like Randy Rampage. And I was like, oh, so you know the songs? And he goes, fuck yeah. So I said, if we ever do an Alice in Hell thing, would you do the Randy Rampage voice tribute thing? And he goes, yeah. So 4 years, 4 years later, he's actually we just do a 4-day rehearsal next month. We're all flying in just to jam the parts and try to see what we need to work on and which songs to play and who does what singing and backups. And but it's really, I'm just going to take everybody out for a nice dinner and hang out and make sure everybody's like on the same positive feeling, right?
Yeah.
Then in June we rehearsed, the 5 of us. And it's cool because 4 years later, after that, after Randy passes away, and I talked to Stu just about if we ever do a show. And then now we got the plane tickets, we got the show booked, and it's Stu's the guy. And I think.
But what happened? Sorry to interrupt you again, but what happened with
Ray?
It was just about like physical that.
I think Ray was going to come in April to do this short 4-day thing. And then we all go home and everybody's happy and we know what to do. And then June is when we do our real rehearsals, 2 weeks, at least 2 weeks, because we're a bunch of old guys and we haven't played together in a long time. So, then I got a message when I was in California at the NAMM convention.
Yeah.
And I got a text message, and without getting into detail, he was saying he was, I think the quote at the end of it was, Father Time has caught up to him. So in Canadian English, or American maybe, Canadian English, that means Father Time has caught up to me, means time is age. So you just interpret that for what that means. Maybe it's a sore shoulder, a sore back, maybe lungs.
Million different reasons.
Like a million, right? So I said, returned back and said very clearly, okay, listen. So in other words, okay, it's not going to work. I can't buy all the plane tickets and promote. The promoter can't put posters up, and we can't tell the fans that it's this lineup if we know it might be or it might not be. We can't do that. So I said, okay, how about this? 2025 is when we're going to go back and we're going to do the best record, Never Neverland. And guess what? Ray was the drummer on the best record. So why don't we'll just carry on with someone else. I'll probably get my original guy back, Fabio, the guy that's been with me for years. Yeah. And he's back. He stepped out so Ray could step in, which was absolutely cool. But I said, Ray, why don't you just 2025, why don't you just come back, and whether it's one show, a tour, or a week, whatever, no pressure, come back and join us for that one, right?
Okay.
So instead of doing the big show in Slovakia with a bit of pressure, it's actually a bit of pressure doing a headline thing like that. And a lot of crew members. Annihilator's not a band that uses a lot of, like, we don't have stage like stuff, and you see us, we just have amplifiers and a little drum riser, and most of the time shitty lights. We just do that. And I thought, well, that's a good low budget way to tour. That's perfect. So this show's different. This show, we hired one of the best light people in the business, and we have a bigger crew than we ever had. And we're still going to have a very open stage, but this time you're going to see a really professional, finely looking show. And I think there was a lot of pressure there too. And so when I heard Father Time has caught up to me, that was the last sentence, I realized I can't rely on that. So I invited him to come with us in 2025, and I really would like him to. And he, unfortunately, instead of feeling disappointed but at the same time, instead of him feeling, disappointed and all that and saying, yeah, okay, I'll love to come with you in 2025 if I can. He got, let's just say, went to the internet and said a whole bunch of things in anger and frustration. And I think what he was saying on I think it was his Facebook page, was essentially, you could just tell he was very disappointed that he's not doing it. And but I was the bad guy, right? So,
but that doesn't happen in 2025 either. So, or is it still in the air?
I'd say that invitation's open, right? I mean, definitely open. It was open for Randy Rampage, and Randy Rampage had done some pretty interesting things when he was in the band. It's not about the people; it's about the music, right? And Ray was a big part of Annihilator's success musically. Like, he didn't write this stuff, but that doesn't matter. It's like Rampage. Rampage didn't write this stuff, but without Randy Rampage, how's this? Sebastian Bach didn't write all that Skid Row stuff.
Yeah.
But without Sebastian Bach, would Skid Row have been so famous? So no, it's always there for me, because I'm like, a lot of times too, I'm the target, because on the internet especially, but also with former crew members or musicians, because, and I understand how other musicians have this happen to them. I've always been at this level where I could hire people from my band, but sometimes I couldn't pay too much money, right? The budgets were not so great. So sometimes I'd have to hire people that were not really professional. Does that make sense? And then that means some of them, when they leave the band, like most people just leave the band and I hire someone else. There's not usually drama or problems. It's only maybe 3 or 4 people that I've had problems with. And usually those are related to drugs or alcohol or some silly things.
Yeah.
But that's the problem. You become a target when you're, well, it's the same thing. If you're an actor, if you have a website, or if you have a magazine, or if you have a festival, or, I've seen every one of those type of people become targets when they're successful. And that's just part of life. I'm successful in my own way. I'm so happy I didn't get to number 1, because I would have probably shot needles in my arm and done too much coke. I wouldn't have been able to handle that as a kid. Yeah. But I'm successful that I'm still alive. I'm healthy so far. I'm doing the Allison Health thing. I did this Amerikan Kaos. I'm doing all this, and I got a beautiful family in that. But, there's a lot of people that are not in the same place, and you become a target. I mean, I have to have a lawyer just from some people just trying to make false claims. And I'm not even famous and rich. Well, maybe rich, but I'm not even famous. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not a famous guy. Like, people don't even know who Annihilator is, or Jeff Waters. In America, you don't see me in any magazines. It's not my goal to be a famous guy. I just have fun in here doing my music now. But I see why guys like Mustaine and a lot of other people are the targets to things. You can see right now why. And I always would say Annihilator's hired maybe 40 different musicians in its whole career. And I might be wrong, but the only ones out of the 40 that I can think of that are successful in the music business right now are Mike Mangini. I think Randy Black is still playing with Destruction. So that's kind of like, that's surviving, right? But I mean, successful Mike Mangini, right? And like, I mean, I'm talking about, you make a living and you don't have another job, and this is what you do for a living.
Yeah.
From back then to now. Okay, let's go back to the first one again. Is there anybody else? I don't even think there's anyone else. There could be. And that's not a negative. I'm just saying that when you're that one guy, well, not Mike Mangini, because he's was employed and now he went on to Extreme, Steve Vai, Dream Theater, right?
Yeah.
If you take him out of there and you take maybe Randy Black and maybe 1 or 2 others that are still maybe making a full-time living, I'm not sure if any more are, and that's not as a negative. I'm just trying to make the point. That means I'm pretty well the one that everybody leaves the band for whatever reason, and they have to go and explain to their friends and their family and their girlfriends and their why they're not on tour in Europe, or why they're not making records anymore. And it's funny, because that's when they start talking and making up stories and getting insecure and thinking, Waters, oh, he's an asshole. Look how many musicians he's had in the band, right? So I've dealt with that for so many decades, and it's just funny. It's amazing. But a lot of those people were important to my career. Otherwise, we wouldn't have Annihilator today, right? But I'm done with the recording. No more Annihilator recording. I'm finished with that.
So now we are also done with the interview. Thanks a lot for taking the time to do this with me, and all the best for the future and for the release of the Amerikan Kaos album,
And that.
as well as that you're showing. Before we
just
wrap
American.
up, anything you want to say to all the fans?
Yeah, and keep it within 15, 20 seconds instead of 3 hours. Okay. No, I just check out this cool video game that's, I think it's kind of out now. Soft launch might be out now.
Yeah.
And it's called Rock Commander with K's. Commander with a K. My sort of life's music experience is all put into that game over the next 2 or 3 years with about 30 songs that I wrote on 3 CDs for a band project called Amerikan Kaos. And these songs will slowly come out in the game, but they'll also be available on like LP and Spotify and iTunes and CD and all that. But really go to the game because it's not only that my project's music is in there, but they're going to be bringing other artists and bands in musically into that game.
Okay.
And they're going to build this over the next years, which is really cool. And you're going to be able to hear some music that you won't get to hear anywhere else. So it'll be pretty cool.
Thanks a lot for taking the time.
Yeah.